Now, we are coming to Adam Weishaupt's own writing, his own text. This is not disputed. This is listed in the Wikipedia articles. I showed you where to find this on the Internet Archive. You can see the title here, Weishaupt Adam das Verbessertes System der Illuminaten 1787. This text is what I'm going to be pulling from, and you can see that it was written by Adam Weishaupt, and he's referencing Frankfurt, Leipzig, and we haven't touched on it in major detail yet, but we know that the Rothschild house in the 1700s was operating out of Frankfurt, and one of the sons was later sent to England later, but just context here. So, with all the ancestry stuff we've been talking about of who is and who is not Jewish, let me establish why I believe this is still more important than all of that. And again, we're going to continue to flesh this out here. Now I am recording this page. This is page 306, so you can see, okay, on page 306, what's written here, and I'm going to translate from this page. And you can see these words here at the bottom. This is where I'm going to stop reading, okay? You can kind of guess where this is going, but I'm going to switch over to the translation now. Again, this is all stuff that I just typed into a translator online. To the life of the whole old world, the world came into being from Erwas. What could have existed before a world had become, and in which the world was brought into being? Here are these born excretions. There was nothing left but to let it flow out of God, and this is then what the emanation system called for. Or God must have a material available which the deity processes and puts in order. So he's discussing cosmology here. He's discussing how the universe came into being. If this sounds familiar, it's going to be obvious why. The material, according to the wisdom of the sun, the night, the kahos, which I'm pretty sure is a word that was incorrectly translated, uncontained formless matter. These married couples find the basics beyond the rest. In the end, I reduce them, all of them, to one of the following if the actual marriage is excluded. They are created from, or the other with different modifications. From the higher philosophy of the Zohar, the Oriental philosophy, the Kabbalah of the Jews. What is the basis of Weishaupt's system? He tells you explicitly. Where did he get it from? He tells you explicitly. So for all these other individuals, and all these people, oh, there's no connection, it's just enlightenment. Well, we've seen over and over and over again an inability to track the ancestry of these individuals, despite an insistence that they're not Jewish. And we've seen multiple connections to high-level Jewish individuals, and we see all this parallel thinking. And what does Weishaupt say explicitly? Where does this system develop from? It's Kabbalah. What is Illuminism? It's a repackaged Kabbalah. That's all that this is. Whether or not Weishaupt is ethnically Jewish, is that as important as the fact that he's deriving his system from Kabbalistic principles? This is the most important part. What he says that this system is, where he says that this system comes from. That's the most important thing. And if you're Jewish, you're going to know how to manipulate it. And given the Jesuitry that we've seen involved in this, and given the presence of Marranos and converts over 100 years prior to this taking place within the Catholic Church, and the inability to authenticate ancestry, what do we think is going on here? It's pretty obvious. It's pretty disingenuous of people to try and dismiss any sort of Jewish connection. And now it's pretty explicitly clear, among other reasons, why they've failed to translate these works into English that we've had access to for such a long period of time. Now, he's going to go on to reference the Apocalypse story, Act 7, verse 22, in the wisdom of the Egyptians and still Solomon's time among the Jews. The wisdom of the Egyptians and the Orientals was very much revered and proclaimed. And then he makes another citation.
Solomon's wisdom even elevated above the wisdom of these evildoers. Jews, including the Gnostic errors, also the Pythagorean Platonic system of those who followed the second path. I am particularly distinguished by the Pythagorean Platonian schools with its predecessors, the Alexandrians and the Electrifiers, as well as today's Theosophists and the Roman Catholics. What are we seeing here? We know the Kabbalistic system is the core, but they're melding the useful ideas of all these other traditions. And you'll see this reference to Egyptian times and Solomon. Solomon obviously features heavily in Freemasonry. But again, where does Albert Pike say that Freemasonry gets its symbols from? In Morals and Dogma. From the Kabbalah. This is where it comes from.
And he continues to go on in more detail to explain this. He describes the world as an outflow of the deity. What is that reminiscent of? Again, the Ein Sof from Kabbalah. A form of matter has to be coerced with God by virtue of being coerced with God. An emanation system. So illuminism. Illuminism to set, make something brighter, to illuminate it, reveal it with light, etc. Again, this is consistent with the Ein Sof, the radiating lights from the Kabbalistic ideas. The ancients imagined the deity as his sea of pure light and ether, symbolizing the Shekinah and the sun and the fire. Where does the Shekinah come from? It's one of the emanations of the Sephiroth, right? Or it's one of the components, the female component of God. That's where a lot of this proto versions of this transgenderism and this Age of Aquarius type stuff, again, the sign that Weishaupt was born under. I'm not saying that that bears any significance to me. I don't believe in astrology, but I do believe that other people believe in it, and I believe that they're really effective at. Most of this stuff revolves around manipulating, convincing, and brainwashing people, and if you get enough people on board with what you're pushing, if you convince enough people, they can start to help you alter the way other people perceive it, and the bandwagon effects takes over, and stuff that normally would not have these psychological effects or physiological effects does, because you've convinced so many people of it. All marriages in this world are fundamentally marriages to the deity. Unkind souls of divine origin are unworthy of care. What is this reminiscent of? It's not as aggressive as the sort of Talmudic or Kabbalistic theses of Gentiles, but it does provide for some separation here. The migration of souls into different types of bodies and the propagation of souls through the souls of their parents. Continuing on here, again, this translation is not perfect. These subordinate emanations were invented in order not to make God the author of evil that people often thought they found in this world. So what is this reminiscent of? Again, the demonic spheres in Kabbalah that I talked about in my Kabbalistic lectures. That's referenced by people like Luria. That's referenced by the Rebbe of the Chabad Lubavitch sect, the tunnel diggers of recent fame, who believe that Gentile souls come from 3 demonic spheres. And they reference spherical ideas many, many times over. Some of these emanations of male desire could follow their teaching if they continued to produce the projections of the emanation, or female, it's a shame if you could just accept it. And this is the reason for all the common doctrine of angels in the East. So he's trying to, again, merge these ideas with Eastern mysticism, just like the Kabbalists do with things like yoga, and they talk about Kundalini yoga and the chakras, mimicking different aspects of the Sephiroth in Kabbalah. So they're using these systems to justify saying this is the true religion that's been hidden from you, etc., etc., not because that's actually the case, but because they're merging a bunch of ideas and saying that this is pointing to some ancient thing, because they're ultimately building toward what Weishaupt said he was trying to do in the first lecture that we talked about. What many of these individuals have said they're going to do. They're trying to create a one-world religion, and they're taking aspects of all the other religions that appeal to people within those religions, and saying, you have an incomplete understanding, let me show you the true way. This is the judgment of the Jews, the obeyed and unobeyed gods, the world feelings of Plato, the demiurge, Adam Kadmon, who's, again, the prototypical perfect being in Kabbalah, and the Sephiroths of the Jewish Kabbalists, the hierarchy of angels and Satan with all its divisions and divisions, the dreams of the Gnostics about their aeons, as also their interference with Christianity, their teaching that the Christianity, or like Simon the Magician itself, was considered to be a superior aeon, a direct outflow of the highest deity. Again, think of Ein Sof from Kabbalah, and all the places of the evangelists of the divinity of Christ, and derive the origin of opinions from its sources. This is also where the aeons of male and female nature, their generation and reproduction, come from. Again, the same sort of mirroring male and female discussion that we saw in Kabbalah, the same mirroring discussion that we saw in Freemasonry, that would provides justification for this feminization of the male, masculinization of the female, reunification into one body, and all this transgender nonsense that we see. The four worlds of the Kabbalists emerging from each other, which is the archetypes, the creation, the formation, and finally the physical over the unseen material world. Material, the lower part of this outflow of the deity, is therefore also imperfect. Everything is the source of Boffin. Again, some of these are incorrectly translated. But what we're seeing here is Weishaupt was able to accumulate a substantial amount of knowledge about the Kabbalistic system, down to the level of the individual Sephiroths and their emanations of light, etc., etc. And this is in the 1700s. So the question is, who's teaching him all this stuff? How is this supposed Gentile getting all this intimate knowledge about the Kabbalah, such that he's chosen to make this the definitive model by which he's bringing about his order, and literally naming it illumination, which mirrors the concept in Kabbalah of Ein Sof? Where is he getting this from? Because I don't think he was taught this stuff by a Gentile. Just FYI.